Welcome to Starseed Joy podcast with your host, Tara Joy Andrews. I'm a starseed, empath, and galactic energy healer living a human experience. On this podcast, we will have authentic, heart-to-heart conversations about starseed experiences, spiritual awakening, divination, light language, spiritual hygiene, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of living with more heart and joy. Ready to get galactic? Let's go. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for listening to Starseed Joy podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Amanda Ingram-Cotton, a mentor for spiritual souls that helps people through their spiritual awakening, helps people release what no longer serves, and assist people in stepping into their power. And as a previous member of a private coaching group with her, I can attest to the level of support, guidance, and overall love that you give people. So I highly recommend her. So check out the links after you listen or watch the show. So thank you
so much.
So yeah, thank you for being a guest. How are you today?
I'm good. Yeah. It's interesting times we live in.
Yes.
I find I always say that when people are like, how are you doing? And I'm like, interesting times.
Yes. I always have these moments of like, next week has to be better. But then it's like a broken record. Like the energy's doing this planet's here. Like I healed this.
Not a lot of rest happening for many of us this year, but it'll all be something really beautiful.
I can't wait for that. Amazing. So each individual's experience when you go through spiritual awakening is different. It's in their own way, in their own timing, at their own pace. So just to start out, I wanted to ask how you would describe what a spiritual awakening is.
Yeah. I think like our human brains want a spiritual awakening to be very like this happens and then this happens and then it all works out and you're great, right? But yeah, unfortunately that's not the case. I mean, we're all unique individuals that experience awakenings in different ways, and some of us really never experience an awakening because we kind of don't choose to see it and to go through what we need to go through to have that awakening. But I think kind of the main theme when it comes to it is you reach this point where you go, oh, that's not working for me anymore. Or you start seeing things differently. And that can be a really interesting experience for many of us, because it's really calling for us to look within, right, and kind of go along. But yeah, that happens differently for everyone, and sometimes we've gone through it and not been able to put a word to it. So like I think we go through many awakenings, just in different ways. You can also maybe say that's ascensions as well.
Yes.
But I can think back to times in like the past that have absolutely changed the course of me moving forward in my life. And those in my mind have been awakenings that I may not have been like, yes, this is an awakening, but I went, oh yeah, no, like I'm different. And I don't know why, but I know that this doesn't work for me. So I'm not going to do it anymore, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's kind of my thoughts on it are very much that like, it's just this moment that you're just like, oh, like something I thought was fine isn't fine anymore.
Yes. Yeah. For me personally, I feel now that you've said it in those terms, when I took a huge career path change, it was like, oh, maybe that was the first mini awakening. That's like, oh, you're doing things for all the other people. It's time to do something you like.
For me, that was when I started to run. It was its own version of that. I I've been living my life for others essentially, right? Just chasing versions of myself. And I guess that became literal chasing when I started running. But to be honest, but the difference was I kind of went, I don't want to do this the way I'm being told I'm supposed to. Like, I don't want to get faster or whatever. And that's when I first tuned into intuition and was like, oh, like I can do it my own way. So for me, that was the very first shift. I mean, there may have been more when I was younger, but like that's the one that stands out the most to me, where I went, oh, maybe I actually know what I need, right? And I don't need other people to tell me. So it was like this light bulb moment of being like, oh, like I may not actually have to look outside of myself for validation, for direction. Maybe that's actually within me. So that was for me my first moment.
Yes. And that's such a beautiful way to put it, because I feel there's moments where all of us go through that tipping point of like, oh, especially I know you and I are both the people pleaser obligers. So where you're like, oh, I don't have to do this to make them happy. I can just look after myself, my own needs, what I want and need, my own direction. Yeah, that was a big one for me as well.
Well, it's like the sensitive people that we are, right? We kind of unfortunately get, I mean, beautiful if your sensitivity was nurtured in you as a child. But for most of us, unfortunately, that did not fit into the dynamic of the world.
No.
And that's just like this really early on thing of kind of being like, oh, who I truly am isn't good. Like it's not seen, it's not welcomed, it's not nurtured. So I need to look outside of myself then, right? And that just kind of starts that chase, that overachieving, just like that constant need to prove yourself, right? To be the fixer, to be the one who makes everybody happy, like all of that stuff. It's all just, I've come to realize it's all just the little kid in me just being like, somebody see me and say that who I am is okay. So it's a really cool shift when we start to see ourselves. And go, no, actually we are okay. Like we're good. Right. And it has a stop. Well, it starts the process of us going, okay, well, how do I untangle myself from all of this crap that I've been carrying all this time? But yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. Love it.
Yes.
So when you were first realizing that something was different about your experiences, and we've already talked a little bit about this, but what was the first thing that made you realize you were going through a spiritual awakening? Maybe talk a little more about that intuition and how you started to lean into it.
Yeah. So the first time I realized what it was, like an actual spiritual awakening, was probably right around the fall of 2020, which wasn't that long ago, but I think it's the first time I'd actually realized what it was that I was experiencing. I had started to just myself go like, this isn't right. And I'm like, I found it, I had anxiety, and I started going to therapy, and through therapy started realizing that anxiety wasn't like this fault of mine. It was actually just my self coping with like not being who I am in the world. Right.
Yes.
And so through that, it kind of led me into like, I learned about energy healing, and I'm pretty sure that's probably where I heard the term, like, well, I've always heard the term spiritual awakening, but I started to realize that was what I was experiencing. And for me, it always kind of presents itself fairly similarly, where I'm just like, I'm done. Like, I can't keep doing this anymore. And I had been in a business program. Part of my journey too was a career change where I left my corporate job. And I was like, okay, I'm going to overachieve at running my own business. And I did all of the things you're supposed to do.
Same.
and it left me very in debt, and still not honoring who I am, right? Trying to be
Right.
something I'm not. And that kind of had me just go like, what am I doing here? Like, this isn't working. So for me, it was a fairly forcible shift into going, I'm going to listen to myself, to my own intuition, follow what feels good, and let that be my guide versus following people. So I stopped following anybody and just started doing all of the things myself, which led me down the path of the spiritual world, which was super fun and magical, as well as the other side of spiritual awakening, right?
Terrifying.
Right. Because I think sometimes, at least I did in the beginning, was I was like, I'm going to be the best at like spiritual awakenings, right? So give me the checkbox that I'm going to tick off, and I'm going to do it. But you can't, right? You can't do that. Because spiritual awakenings, again, are individual, but there's also a lot of healing, right?
Yes.
I think we get really excited about the idea, or I did, of like, oh, I'm going to learn all the things. It's going to be so fun and magical. But it's not outside of yourself, right? And it's not so much learning new things as peeling back the layers that are keeping you from the knowledge that you already have, right? Because it's the inner wisdom that we're trying to uncover here, not take on more information that's not necessarily ours. So that's the part that's it's hard. It's not easy work to do. But my goodness, as you start to peel those layers away, that old conditioning, old messaging, there's some really amazing stuff underneath all of that, especially for those of us who've really never seen it before. I have no idea who I was. I'm still discovering who I am. And that's a really interesting journey to go on. So I think that's a huge part of this whole spiritual awakening thing, is just getting to know who you really are underneath all of the crap that you've been carrying. And that's exciting and petrifying, because sometimes it's not what you thought, and it may not fit in the narrative that you've carried for a very long time.
Yes. Oh, 100%. And you come to realize that, those difficult parts of your life and all of those traumatic incidents you may have been happening, and traumatic incidents don't have to be like a plane crash, right? They could be just things that recur through your childhood or through your life with a spouse or parent or friend. Even friends can give you trauma. That's actually who shaped who you are. So I used to hate that bad things happened to me, but now I'm almost like giving gratitude to the negative things that happened to me, because they've showed me how much more resilient and strong I am, and have allowed me to go through these deep healings that expose that inner self, that you're like, oh, I'm that's me. Wow. Right. Who knew? That's me. Yeah. So it's beautiful in that way. And I always thought spiritual awakenings, like in before times, I was like, okay, that people just get this epiphany where they just wake up one morning and they're suddenly a totally different person. They like move, change jobs, everything happens at once. Right. And then that's it. Where spiritual awakening is like, it's always happening. The work is never done. And like the onion, there's always more layers to go through and unpack. And when you're healing things, I found, a year ago I healed something, and then last week it comes up again. Yeah. But this time it's like deeper. And you're like, crap, I thought I was done. Nope.
Yeah, And those are the times that you can be like, oh my gosh, I'm going backwards. Like, oh no,
Yes.
like I haven't actually done anything. And that's when, like you're saying, like this reminder that like it is cyclical, like things come back around as often as they need to just show you something else that needs to be healed. And it's always the universe, I think, being like, this is how you get what you're asking for, right? Like, this is
Yep.
how you can be happy. This is how you can have XYZ, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, because again, I think it's shifting it away from like this beginning, middle, and end, and then you're just
Yep.
done and you never have to do anything
Yeah.
again.
Well, that was hard.
Right? And I think that can make many of us feel like failures on it if we're like, oh, I'm never getting there. But it's so much more empowering, I think, to be like, well, you never are going to be finished. Like, that's not the point, right? The
Yep.
point is that you're always going to be learning, right? There's always going to be stuff to learn and to heal and to grow. That's the point. Like, that's why you're here on earth. And I think that changes the perspective, and it probably changes even like the timeline and the ideas of like having to always be like making progress and stuff like that. It kind of shifts it back to just being like, oh, I can just be then, and this will just happen, and I'll just
Yeah.
be here going, okay, sure, like what's next now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a cool way to at least change the perspective of it, of like this kind of, we have to constantly be I don't know, moving forward or showing, having like, or producing something, that kind of
Yeah.
that
Having,
capitalist mindset of like, you always have to be doing.
yeah. Or like having magic moments every day and like epiphanies. Cause I know when I first started working with you, I was like really excited. Things were expanding, things were happening for me. And then there was like 2 months where the message I kept getting is just rest, do nothing. And I'm like, but I want the cool stuff to happen.
Like,
And
come
every
on.
time you're like, no, just rest. Like,
Yeah,
you got to rest. You got
it's
to
hard.
take in and process what you've learned. Like, but I don't want to.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, especially for those of us who want things to happen quickly, right? It's like this, having to, probably like an ego check even, of like, doesn't happen on our timeline,
Yep.
right? It happens on whatever timeline it has to happen on. And I feel like you've experienced this. I have too, where like I've just been, this isn't happening fast enough. Like, why isn't this happening? And then when it finally does, I was like, oh, yeah, that's fair.
Yep.
And I'm like, because these 3 things had to happen, and then this happened, right? And I was like, if I had have just let go and trusted, I would have been much happier for like this amount of
Yep.
time. But no, I was like forcing it, trying to control the situation. And that didn't help, because we ended up in the same place regardless. But
At the
that's
same
also part of the
time.
growth, right? Yeah, the exact same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's all part of the growth, I think. That's
Yeah.
something that I need to work on too, always, is trust. Just
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah. One of my favorite experiences, well, it wasn't my favorite at the time, but now it was like I was just starting to meet with some of my guides. So I sat down to do a guided meditation, and I'm like, I'm going to get them here and I'm going to ask them all the questions. And it was in one of these times where you're like, just rest, rest, rest. And so I get to the little cottage in my meditation, the fire's going, my guide shows up, and then I start asking questions, and they just sit there and don't say anything. And then I was like, you're not going to tell me anything, are you? And they just like shook their head. And they're like, you just want me to rest, right? And they're like, yep. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I got it now.
It's such a fun journey I'm on.
I'm like, okay, I should listen now, because it was directly from one of my guides. Rest. Yeah. So there's some physical symptoms that can also be related to spiritual awakening. And when I read them, because I also studied Reiki, so when you do energy healing, there's always symptoms or side effects, things that happen after you get a treatment. And it isn't a coincidence that many are similar. And I just wanted to ask what's happening in our physical bodies when we're reacting to those changes in energy.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of individual. I know there's
Yes.
like, and to be honest, a lot of the time they can be like symptoms even of like being ill. So
Yes.
the caveat is always go see a doctor.
Yes. Yes.
Persist, right? But I'm always like, I have the disclaimer.
Yeah.
But no, for me personally, I would get headaches, anxious, sometimes just like this weird, like unsettled feeling. And it really would vary depending on what was going on. But like I would always get like a really big burning and like where my third eye would be, when stuff was trying to kind of come through and stuff like that. So and sometimes dizziness too, actually, just like feeling really off. It was really just a feeling of being off without really an explanation. Like with me being like, I'm not sick, but I'm not feeling at my best and I'm not completely sure. And just being exhausted. Exhausted was one that is consistent for me. And I usually equate that to like, we need the rest to take in the information, to be ready perhaps for something that's to come. And I think it's like the universe's way. I mean, sometimes it's the universe's way of being like, slow down, like you're going to burn yourself out. But other times I also think it's the universe's way of just being like, hey, something big is going to be coming here. Like you need to rest. So, but as we know, for many of us, that's really hard to do, to rest in a way that is actually restful. But yeah, those tend to be the symptoms that I experience.
Yeah, mine were the same, like headaches often. And like these are symptoms I still get when I go through a big healing or a big jump, whenever and whatever it is. Flu-like symptoms were big ones for me in the beginning, like the body aches. And my spine even started like cracking and aligning when I first started awakening. And I remember asking you once, because I was like, I don't know what's going on. Can you help me? And you were like, actually, your body is aligning as like everything else in your energy is aligning. So like your physical body is also adjusting to all of the changes. And the dizziness, there's sometimes when it's not all day. It's like for 10 minutes, I feel like I'm on a boat. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm completely sober. All I did was go from my desk to the kitchen, and now I'm in a fishing boat. What happened? And then like 5 minutes later, it's gone. So it's interesting that it's also not the same. And you can't like everything with spiritual awakenings, you can't plan for it. It just happens.
It happens exactly the way it's meant to, really.
I
don't really think you can do it wrong. That like, and I know that may be a message that's not often given to us, but like, I really don't. Like, it's your journey. You can't mess up the journey. Sure, you can maybe choose not to listen. Maybe you choose the thing that wasn't in alignment with you, but that's not failing at your journey. That's just shifting it and changing it, and maybe you needed to do that to learn, right? Like
Mhm.
it's kind of taking us out of this, like there's only a right way or a wrong way to do it, and just going, no, you just do it. Like there
Yeah.
is no right or wrong, it just is, right?
Yeah.
And that can be helpful too. That's probably a good reminder
Yeah.
for me, even not right now.
Yeah.
Like, thanks, self, in the universe.
Yes. You can't mess it up.
You can't
You
mess this
can't mess it up. Maybe it'll take longer if you
Yeah,
choose, but you'll always reach at the destination.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I understand it.
Yeah. And I mean, and sometimes I would even say, but maybe it was supposed to take longer, right? Like to
Yeah.
even jump even more into it, to just be like, yeah, but maybe that's absolutely what you had to do to make that the last time that you did it that way. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
where you go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did that again, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
that may actually be the very thing that changes everything. So it's kind of cool to think about it in all these different ways. And like I think that's actually the fun part of the awakening is that it's all you,
Yeah.
right? Nobody can walk that for you. All they can do
Mhm.
is walk alongside you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Such a good reminder. So let's chat about the common intuitive clairs.
Mm-hmm.
So these are intuitive gifts which are enhanced through our senses, and most people have them, but they don't really put that connection together that it's like clairvoyance, clairaudience.
Yeah.
So clairaudience,
Mm-hmm.
clear hearing.
Yes.
Is this something you experience?
Yeah, so I always thought clairaudience. I was like, oh, I don't have that. I don't have people talking to me, right? Not like for whatever reason, I was like, it's just gonna be somebody talking to me, which people do have. And that's how they receive messages, but it's actually not like, that's not the main way. It's more hearing tones in your ears, right? Hearing tones. Um, and that's just a sign to pay attention to what's around you, what you're thinking of at that moment, or that angels or guides are sending you information. So you can kind of just it's just like to be mindful. Another clairaudient that I had read about was also getting messages through music, right? Like being really musically inclined probably means that you're clairaudient as well. But we all have, I mean, we have the ability to access all of these.
Yes.
I think we happen to have one, maybe two that like are the ones that are the most comfortable using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have clairaudience, but it's my own voice. It's very weird. At first, it was really hard to distinguish, like, is this my thought or is this a message? Because it's like my own internal voice. Like when I'm thinking, it's the same voice. Yeah.
I have
Claire.
that too.
Yeah. But I was the same. I'm like, this is my voice. It's supposed to be someone else. But no, it's you.
And that's okay too. It's not
that's
okay if it's not
too.
another voice.
Exactly. Clairvoyance, clear seeing.
Clear seeing. So this I talk about this a lot actually with clients and stuff, because I think we think that this is like the only one, right? This is the only one that makes you psychic or that has gifts. So that's clear seeing, right? So it's in some cases it's actually like seeing spirits. It can also be like you see visions, or you dream and you see visions. For some people that's even premonitions and stuff like that. And yeah, like when you think of a stereotypical like psychic ability, you think of like, oh, I see you in the forest with this, right? So that would be clairvoyance. Like I have visions, but I believe for me the visions are created from my claircognizance, which I know we'll talk about in a few seconds. So I'm not sure that they're actually, the vision isn't the thing that comes first. It's like I just know what the vision is going to look like, or what the image is going to look like before. So just in case you're somebody who has that, And for me personally, I'm fine with not seeing spirits. I see like orbs and stuff like that sometimes, and things out in the corner of my eye, and I'm always like, hey team, cool, glad you're here, but like hard pass on seeing ghosts. Like I'm good. Like I have like my own personal boundaries there that I'm just like, no, I'm okay. But I know other people see them, and
I also don't see spirits. I feel like I may have seen them in passing, like the peripheral out of the corner of your eye, but I don't see like full bodied apparitions in front of me, and I am the same. That's okay.
Like I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good with the other Claires.
I like cool to hear other people talk about it. I'm
fine. So clairsentience is clear feeling, which I know empaths have.
I would go so far as to say that like being an empath and clairsentience are like one and the same thing, essentially. And that's right, it's feeling. You feel the energy of someone, you feel the energy of a room. And I know for many of us who are sensitive, we feel that deeply, right? Like, you know, if someone's words are not matching the energy that they're presenting to you, right?
Great lie detectors.
Right. It can also be not great because you can take on other people's energy, especially like negative energy. You can take on collective energy too, right? So clairsentience can also be like tapping into like the energy of the whole world, like the whole collective. So with those things, especially for myself, it's a lot of grounding, clearing, because this is one of my main ones for me is clairsentience.
Same.
It's also one of the most confusing ones, because you don't know what energy is yours. Sometimes you don't know what energy is other people's. So right. So like those of us who have clairsentience need to be like constantly grounding ourselves. Which you can do with like, you carry crystals, you can do grounding, you do meditation, you can shake your body, like whatever it is to I learned from an amazing medicine woman, Asha Frost. She showed an energy clearing ceremony where like she was snapping to clear the energy. So like really cool stuff like that. So there's different things to it you can explore. But like that's the main thing you need to be able to do with clairsentience is know what's yours and what's not yours. And then it's the most cool gift on the planet. It really is. It doesn't feel like a burden when you're able to do that. But it may feel
exactly
like a huge burden when you don't have the ability to do it, or you just don't even know.
I remember when my boyfriend first started working from home full time, I would be getting frustrated and upset, and I would literally have to check in and be like, is this me? Am I actually frustrated? Or is it my partner who happens to now be working in the same space all day? And then if it was him, I would secretly go have a dance party.
Amazing. And that's what we need, right? Just to like get that energy out and just make sure it's not yours.
Or like go hang out on the balcony for a few minutes and listen to the birds and look up at the sky. It was a very interesting learning experience.
Right.
So claircognizance, which you mentioned earlier.
Claircognizance. Clear knowing. So this one is also super interesting because this is I would say my secondary one over clairsentience. And again, I feel like I don't know where I thought the information was supposed to be coming from. Like, I think it starts to melt into like the clairaudience where I was like, well, it can't be my voice or it's not the clear knowing, but it is my voice. And it's not and it's just like, I would just talk and things would come out and I'd be like, oh, like earlier when I talked, I was like, oh yeah, look at that. Way to go, self. But it's like channeling, it's like that claircognizance that comes through and taps into what I believe is like universal truths as well as our own like unique wisdom that we tap into. And it's like these moments that we have of And it can be in any way, whether that's talking, whether that's creating art or music or writing a book or speaking on a stage, where everything just feels effortless and it flows and you just know things. That can be really a part of it. The other part also is just knowing, right? Like you just know that something's up, you know something's coming, you know someone's gonna call, right? Like, I mean, that's the that's kind of those interesting pieces. For me, it presents itself very much in through just having a conversation. And I'll say things and I honestly will be like, I have no idea how I knew that, where that came from. But it sounds great and I'm gonna go with it. And that's that claircognizance that comes through. So that can also be an interesting one to decipher, I think, of like what's you and what's you channeling stuff. But maybe we're always channeling too, which is another interesting road to go down.
I remember times with coworkers when they would have been in a meeting that I wasn't involved in, and then they come back and they're like, guess what? And then I would be like, blah blah blah, and they're like, how the hell did you know that? And I would literally be like, I don't know, I don't know, I just knew.
Super cool, right? Like super
but
cool.
At the same time, I'm like, oh, how did I know that? Weird.
Right.
So these next two ones are clair aliens, clear smelling, and clair gustance, clear tasting, which I haven't experienced. Well, now that I say that I haven't, I'm like, I do remember in a meditation smelling pine trees around me.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I personally I can't think of a time that I have experienced these. I know these ones are a little bit lesser known, except to those who experience it, I would imagine. But so they're exactly what they sound like, right? Like they're you taste something, or you smell something. And I have a client who, when she's reading for people, will like smell cigarettes, and like that'll be part of the reading because it's someone who's near her, and she like can associate different smells with different people in her life. So there's stuff like that, right? And that goes beyond like, oh, I associate like the smell of roses with my grandmother. But this would be like me sitting here right now, like I'm like, oh, I can smell roses, my grandmother's here, right? So it's a little bit different than just the connection. And the same thing with clear taste. I mean, I don't necessarily have like the best explanation, but I know someone who like had tasted like copper, and it ended up being like, I can't remember what it was, but it had something to do with someone they knew or something like that. So so it's kind of cool. You need to pay attention to that kind of stuff. If all of a sudden you're like, what's that? What's that taste?
It'd be good if I could always taste chocolate.
Oh, right? I just call upon these things. That would be amazing.
Yes. Chocolate, please.
Having not experienced it too much myself, I can't speak too much to it, but it's cool to just be aware of them, I think, because if you experience it, you can kind of just go, oh, that's what that is. Cool.
Yeah. So you mentioned your intuition sort of came through first, but what other gifts came through for you when you first started awakening?
I think it's interesting because I think it was less about kind of discovering them as remembering them, if that makes any sense. Like kind of just being like, oh yeah, you've been here the whole time, I just never really understood you, right? Which is kind of part of that, like the clairsentience, right? The feeling. It wasn't so much like I had done that my whole life, right? But it was actually understanding it, right? And understanding what it was and what it was doing. And the claircognizance as well was a really cool one, because that's a lot of what I do in my work, right? I use claircognizance a lot combined with the clairsentience, to be honest, because what I've ended up finding is when we're looking for our gifts, a lot of the time our gifts are very much connected to what we needed, right? What we needed when we were younger. And for me, it was, right, I just wanted someone to really see me. And in not having that, I became that for others, right? So I was able to truly see people, and I'm able to use my clairsentience to feel the energy behind words, feel the energy behind the person, as well as use the claircognizance to kind of know what to say, right? Know what needs to be heard. Not to tell someone what to do, but to really just illuminate the wisdom that's already within them, right? To empower them to know that what they, that what's within them is right and good. So these were kind of the gifts that I remembered, and I'd love to tell you that I instantly knew how to use them and what my gifts were, but to be honest, it was it was still a big part of my learning and my journey. So I just tried a bunch of stuff, right? The intuition started to come through when I taught intuitive movement, like it feels like a lifetime ago. And that wasn't quite the right fit for me. And I did mediumship for a while, which was also super fun, but also not quite the right fit. And we just have to keep trying things when it comes to our gifts, and letting go of the fear of maybe getting it wrong or it not working, and not seeing those as failures, but just as these beautiful opportunities to grow.
Yes.
Right. And that it's okay to just pivot and do something else.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's fine. It's okay to not even want to make this your job if you don't want to.
Yes.
Because you are doing your gift no matter what. Right.
Yes.
Your gifts are being used all the time. And I really do believe we're just starting to understand them in our awakening, and use them with more intention, which is really cool. And then we get to choose how we do that. Right. So yeah, it was, I think that answers your question. It was really, it was intuition, which kind of led me to, it was kind of intuition I think of as a compass. It's always this place we can come back to and kind of go, is this the right way, intuition? And to be like, and sometimes it's intuition speaking to us, and sometimes it's our louder voice that's just old programming. But we know when we get it right, because it feels good. It feels calm. And that has just kind of led me to all of these rememberings and understandings, really. And a lot of this stuff, it didn't happen like years and years ago. It's happened recently. And I don't mind saying that, because that's how the journey works.
Yes. And like some people might experience a crazy rapid awakening over a week or a month, and other people who I know, it's been 20 years and they've slowly progressed over time. The common denominator though is in 2020 something shifted and we were all going a lot faster. Right. It's like someone decided to step on the gas a little bit.
Yeah. And it's funny because it sped things up by slowing things down.
Yes. Right. It's like that duality of we're gonna speed up the awakening by stopping everything else around you.
I know for me, that was the first time I've ever actually sat with myself. I talk a lot about like hustling and chasing and all of these things. And that was always where I was at, like just pushing. I'm not trying hard enough. This didn't work. I'm a giant failure. I didn't try hard enough. So I'm going to try harder next time. And when COVID kind of hit, it was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to be for a bit. And I never done that. And I didn't do the best job at it because I would constantly think about all the things I needed to do. But it was a different way of being for me. And that unlocked a ton of stuff. And I think what some of us may be experiencing now, as fingers crossed, things are opening back up and picking back up again, is that maybe that pace of life doesn't work for you anymore, right? Maybe we don't want to be doing all of the things, right? Maybe we don't want to keep pushing. Maybe some of the things that we thought we wanted, we don't want, or that mattered to us before don't matter, right? Because we've undergone a huge transformation. And I think this is part of like this whole new discovery part of the spiritual awakening journey now, of like, what do you want then, right? How can you do that? Because we may be kind of pulled back into old patterns of hustling that just are like, we are like, everything in our being is screaming at us to stop. And that was really even me up until like not that long ago, where I realized what I was doing, and I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, this isn't fun. So it's really interesting how all of this has played out, which is obviously for a reason.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And another layer of that hustle and must have productivity came back for me last week and this week, where I was like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not trying hard. And then I just had to have a moment of like, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. You're not behind. There's no race that you're in. There's no finish line you have to cross at a certain point. Just let it happen. And then I feel like I had a nap.
It was perfect. Well, and it's also coming like, as sensitive people, it's also like reshaping our view of the world as like, because when we were younger, it was like, something's wrong with us, right? So we have to change, right? And that's very like, I'm going to look outside of myself for someone to tell me if I'm doing it right. I always joke, am I peopling, right? And like, now we get to sit in a place of, what if it's those systems that are broken? There's nothing wrong with us, right? Like, we don't have to change. And that in itself, I think, like, choosing ourselves, choosing to say no to what doesn't work for us, within reason, we still have to live and survive in this world. Within reason, though, that I believe will help to change things, right? And will help others who don't have a choice of whether they have to hustle or not, whether they're safe to be who they are in the world, because there's lots of people who aren't, not by choice. But for those of us who have the privilege of being able to do that, when we say no, when we kind of stop buying into this culture, this belief system, that's going to start changing the system, as well as giving us space, us energy, us confidence to also use our voices in a way that maybe we haven't before. Because again, those of us who are sensitive, speaking out is hard, right? And that isn't something I'm necessarily like defending, but it's the reality of growing up being told that it's not right. But so it's interesting to think of it in an even bigger way. And those are just my thoughts. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of differing viewpoints out there, but I do really truly believe that we can change the world in this way.
I'm with you. We're doing it.
Right?
Yeah, we're doing it. So something I experienced at the beginning of my spiritual awakening is connecting with and communicating with my guides, which I sort of spoke about a bit earlier. And the first guide who stepped forward was a blue galactic light being who was tall, thin, and had iridescent mermaid-like skin. And when I tell other people this, some of them are like, oh my God, I would have been terrified. But me, I was like, this is amazing.
Remember you telling me about this?
This is awesome. And they wore a cloak. They had like a single crown, a single crystal in the crown over their third eye. Yeah, I was just blown away. So is everyone able to connect with their guides and like yeah, maybe just talk about what the process is like.
Yes.
Mm.
I think we put too much pressure on it.
Yes.
I think our humanness, again, I talk about humanness a lot, but I think sometimes we forget that we're both, right? We're both
Yes.
soul and human being, right?
Yes.
And I think in sometimes in our analytical brains and our humanness, we're like, okay, tell me who's on my team. I want to know their names. I want to know their backgrounds. I want to, like, how do I communicate with them? And we have it in our minds as looking a certain way. And if I could give one piece of advice for any, like, for spiritual awakenings or anything spiritual, it is take what you think it should be and throw it out the window, because it's not going to serve you. Because first and foremost, that's other people's experiences that we're hearing.
Yes.
And we're kind of thinking that it's going to be the same for us, or if it's different for us, then it's not, we're not doing it right.
Then we're failing. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many different ways that you can connect to your spirit guides. One of the easiest is honestly to just do a meditation, right? Just get into a meditative state and just ask. Just be like, do I have spirit guides? Does anyone want to come forward? Do you have a message for me? And then just let it be whatever it is, right? If it's nothing, that's okay. If it's a color, cool. If it is a voice, great. If it's a word even, right? It doesn't have to be something. And you can also do it in different ways, like through journaling. You do the same thing. Like you can just start writing and ask, like, who are my guides? Like, are you here? And not worry about it, because your guides and angels are sending you stuff all the time. They're sending you messages and songs. Well, I actually think that your guides pay attention to what you do and then infuse messages into that. So that could be a meme on Facebook when you need it, right? Like, it could be numbers. Because for me, I had launched something and was kind of like, oh, was that the right thing? Oh my gosh. And like, I saw 222 like 4 times, which is like, don't worry. I'm like, you're on the right path. Everything's fine. And that was my guide speaking to me. So my guides don't really necessarily, we don't like sit together and have a conversation. Sometimes we do. But more often than not, it's just, they're there guiding me when I need them. If I'm paying attention. So it's just kind of pay attention and don't write things off as coincidences, because they're not. It can be frustrating for someone to say, like, do it the way it feels right for you. Just like, just tell me how to do it.
Yes.
But
the human brain.
Right? But honestly, you know what the best way to do it. You're better off to just have like an idea of how to do it, and then figure out the way that feels best for you. And that can be trying a whole bunch of different things too. But absolutely, you can connect to your guides. I would bet you anything that they're already communicating with you all the time.
Yeah. When my mentorship group did the Akashic records, I had someone go in my records and ask, who are my guides and what, because again, human brain. Oh, I have this way to know all the answers. And the answer to the question was, your guides will always change. And
that's a
and
good
they'll
point
only
too.
And they'll come in when you need them. And maybe they come in as an animal or a bird or a song, or like you say, you'll have a dream too, right? Yeah It's I find it fascinating, and just the more you open to allowing the signs and synchronicities to happen, the more you notice them, I find. Whereas if you're like, oh, it's not happening, I'm blocked, then the universe is like, oh, she wants to be blocked.
And don't forget too that sometimes no message is a message.
Yes.
Sometimes when we're not getting answers, it's because we're not supposed to have the answers. You may need to wait a little bit. Something may need to fall into place. You may just be being asked to rest and to just put that down for a while. I think sometimes we desperately want to speak to our guides when we're struggling. We need an answer, like,
yes.
And that can be the very time that we're not supposed to get the answers. We're supposed to just wait.
Yes.
And it's like a lesson in like waiting and trusting. Those are the most frustrating times, I think, in those awakenings. At least for me, they are.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're like, why aren't you talking to me? Yeah. And they're like, silence.
I would always pull the empty well card when I would do card readings when I'd ask questions, and I just laugh and I'd be like, yeah, noted. I'm not allowed to know the answer yet.
Yeah.
And that can be another way too to connect your guides, by the way, is like cards. Like
Oracle cards, tarot. Yeah.
Those are like my favorite things to use.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I need to have you on another show to talk about divination.
Oh, yeah. I would love to do that.
So with fun. Cards and
cards are my favorite.
Yeah. Same. I've amassed quite a collection. I'm like, it's for the cause. It's for the cause. I'm enabling myself right now.
I love it.
So if what advice, I guess to rephrase it, what advice would you have for someone who's just awakening, looking for support and guidance?
Yeah. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I would just remember, first and foremost, that you're not alone in this. It can be hard if you're going through an awakening and no one else is around you. It can feel very lonely, but you're not alone. And that this journey is uniquely yours. And I've done this. I'm sure it's probably most people's go-to is like, I need someone to tell me what to do, right?
Yeah.
But always remember that when people are sharing their steps, those are theirs from their journey. So they may not align with you because your journey, again, is yours. So when you're looking for guidance and help, it's really cool to have someone who empowers you, who awakens your wisdom, and allows you to walk that journey, and is there, of course, to support you through the healings and the steps, and to validate your feelings, and to see you. But ultimately, it's yours. And like we talked about, that's equal parts awesome and terrifying. Yep. But yeah, and just, yeah, you can't do it wrong. You can't do it wrong. There's dark parts of it, of healing. There's beautiful parts of self-discovery, and there's everything in between. And it continues to happen in different ways throughout your whole life. So it's almost kind of like this, you can fight it or you can enjoy the ride. And we tend to do both, depending on the day, on where we're at.
Yep.
And that's where having that support can be really helpful, so you don't feel like you're circling. But it's going to be amazing, and it's going to allow you to really discover who you truly are underneath it all, and to experience all the things that you've wanted perhaps your whole life and you haven't been able to achieve, and this is how. And it's not learning, it's not taking on more information, it's just letting all of that old crap go, so that you can be. And that's where all of that magic happens, because I can promise you your magic. There's nothing.
Yes. Everybody's magic.
100%.
And you can't do it wrong.
Yeah.
That should be on a t-shirt.
right?
Everyone is magic. You can't get you can't
Can't
do
get
it
it
right.
wrong. Absolutely.
So another of your gifts is channeling messages for people and help them on their path and their highest purpose on the earth. Is there an overall message that you have felt coming through recently that's repeated?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it a fair amount today, and it's probably because it's just been so like constant for me lately of this shift in culture and what we're doing, and in always doing and chasing, and like this idea that it's time to be, right? So for me, like when we talk about being, that's what we're here on earth to do, right? And we're here to be happy, we're here to rest, we're here to be creative, we get to enjoy our lives, again, for those who can, who have the privilege of doing that. And what keeps us from being is the constant doing, right? The constant feeling like we aren't enough, so trying to prove that, just caught up in these broken systems that are keeping us from getting to enjoy life, from actually living, right? And it took me a while to realize that like I wasn't actually living, I wasn't being present in my life. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of maybe not coming to that term yet, but definitely knowing that they're tired. Yes. They're tired of this. They're tired of all of it. And for good reason. There are so many of us who this way of being is not who we are. And maybe it was quiet before, but as we're kind of on this journey and we're healing and we're recognizing who we are, we're really starting to feel this like, this isn't right. Like, I'm not supposed to do this, but what do I do? Because I'm here, I'm in this. How do I get out of this? Or how do I balance between both worlds of being and then obviously we have things that we need to do in life, right? We need to pay bills, we need to live. How do we exist as both? Is it possible? I believe it is. And that's kind of the message right now is just how can we be more rather than do more? Because I'm certain you're doing more than enough and it's probably not making you very happy. So it's time to choose a different path. And this is the different path. Is the beginning.
Yeah. I've often thought, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, what a person's daily life was like compared to today, with like internet and cars and jobs. And, we're constantly, what I feel, we're constantly distracting ourselves from just being. We're working, we're taking the kids to soccer, we're doing laundry, we're always doing.
And different roles aren't valued, right? Like being a mom isn't valued.
Yes.
Right? That's not a job, right? Like that's not valued as the work it should be. And so we're expected to do that and, right?
Yes.
On top of like the other layers of stuff that are just us trying to prove ourselves in a world that has never accepted us for who we are, right? So it all like feeds into like this kind of really toxic cycle that we're in. But I really think people are at this point of being like, yeah, no, I'm done. Like no more of this.
Yeah,
but how?
How? Yes, the how is
the part now.
Yeah. And the how will be different for each person, I feel. Yeah.
Absolutely will.
Yeah.
So back to awakening your inner wisdom again.
Yes. And if it feels right, it is right.
100%. If it feels good, probably a good sign you should do it.
Yeah. And another thing I've realized is if it's easy, it's probably one of your gifts or one of what you're meant to be doing.
Yes.
Whereas if you try to force it, like you're trying to get that pendulum to swing and it won't, maybe you're not meant to use the pendulum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
It's allowed to be easy.
Yes.
Not everything's easy. Healing's not so easy. But,
healing is not
easy. Using your, like doing your gifts and like following your intuition, that at the end of the day should feel easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before we wrap up, I was gonna ask if you had any offerings happening soon. I know a few that you do.
Right. On this, yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, and like just how people can take advantage of them. And I will share links in the show notes and the video description so people can easily find you.
Perfect. Yeah. So offerings, in the same vein as talking about this hustle, because I really do believe that us kind of getting out of that culture allows us to really be and to discover who we are underneath it all. And within that is all of these things that we seek, the happiness, the resting without feeling guilty, like all of these really beautiful things that we don't have right now in our lives, right? Being confident is who we truly are. I am launching a membership called Stop Hustling, Start Living Collective. And this is going to be, I was going to make a flowery name for it, but I was like, no, I think we're just going to be like blunt about what this is. And this is just a really cool space where like, I'll be sharing about my journey because I am not one to pretend that I have it all figured out. I don't think any of us do. So we get to share all of our wisdom. There are going to be circles where we learn and heal and have activations around being who we truly are, and around kind of letting go of old energy that isn't ours to carry. We're also going to be having teachings as well around, some of the, not the how-to steps per se, but more of the idea of what we need to awaken within ourselves, and how do we awaken this inner knowledge that already knows how to do this within us, right? We're going to be doing that, as well as we're going to have guests on, which I'll talk to you about later. We're going to have guests on to also share how do we be, maybe things that we can do that are creative and fun, healings, like all of this kind of stuff. Card readings are also going to be a part of it. Anyway, it's a whole big thing that's just going to give a sense of community. It's going to allow those of us who are wanting different to start creating a different life, and having that support and that belonging in a place where we have like-minded souls. So that is starting on March 1st, but the doors are open now and you can join anytime. You can cancel anytime, and the cost for that is $47 Canadian a month. So if anybody is interested in that, we would love to have you.
Amazing.
Very cool, very transformative. So that'll be fun. The other place you can find me is my Facebook community called The Quiet Visionary. And then on my website and stuff like that, I'm sure will be down there, but also my website at embraceandglow.com. So thank you so much for letting me come on and share all of this stuff. It's been really fun, as always.
Yes, always a good time when we have Zoom chats. Usually they're not recorded and shared, but when I got the idea for the podcast, I was like, Amanda has to be my first one.
Yes, I'm the first one. I'm so excited. Oh, I'm so excited.
Yes, first one.
Amazing. Oh, this was so much fun. Thank you so much. I love that you're doing this.
Yeah,
helpful for so many people.
Yes, the world needs to know.
Definitely. World needs more starseeds.
Yeah, starseeds with light language and all of the good stuff, but also reminding us that we're always going to be doing it as a human. So,
yes. Which is a big message to remember.
Yes.
we are here on Earth and we have
Yeah.
to deal with the earthly things. That's why we're here.
Yeah. And
Right?
when my mentorship group got together, I think it was last weekend or the week before, someone mentioned how we always, like, our souls are these people who are from advanced societies, and like we really want to go back there, and how cool would it be? But then it's like, but they want to come here.
Right.
So Earth is pretty badass as well. So
Right.
just a reminder that we keep coming back to Earth. So there's a reason for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing right now. We're living it.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have an amazing day, and I will
You
talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.